Now, if you've watched any of my videos to this point, it's pretty obvious and very clear that the SCHD ETF or the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF is one of my favorite ETFs across the entire stock market. And that's because of its cheap expense ratio, the fund's objective, and the fact that SCHD over time at least has went up in price, but also paid dividends consistently and more in dividends long term. And for those reasons, along with others, I've been building out a substantial SCHD position in my long-term portfolio that you can see right here currently sits at around 642 shares across all my portfolios combined. But just as of recently, I was digging a little bit deeper into another pretty popular dividend growth style ETF that seems to offer a lot of things that SCHD offers, but even does it better in some ways. Now in this video specifically, we're going to dig into the Fidelity High Dividend ETF or ticker symbol FDVV, see what this ETF is, how this ETF works, and show you how this ETF has even outperformed SCHD over certain timeframes. So if you consider yourself a dividend growth investor always on the hunt for higher quality dividend growth style ETFs, make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into this one. Real quick, for those that haven't already, make sure to go to the first link in my description and grab my new dividend investing ebook, where I share exactly how I went from $0 invested to now earning over $6,000 on a monthly basis and over $1 million invested in the markets. Along with the ebook, you're also going to receive my custom dividend tracker, where you can track your dividend progress on an ongoing basis and reach your dividend investing goals. So make sure to grab yourself a copy of my dividend investing ebook and the new dividend tracker today. It's the first link in my description. Now, without wasting any time, digging right into the Fidelity High Dividend Yield ETF to try to understand a little bit more about the ETF, the objective, etc. It says right here, the objective, providing investment returns that correspond before fees and expenses, generally to the performance of the Fidelity High Dividend Yield Index. Now, the strategy says normally invest at least 80% of assets in securities, including the Fidelity High Dividend Yield Index, and in depository receipts representing securities including the index. It may lend securities to earn income for the fund also. So basically, by tracking or utilizing the Fidelity High Dividend Index, it basically invests in that. Now, some details about the fund. The fund has only been around since September of 2016, so it's generally new. The assets under management, though, is pretty massive. Almost $3 billion in assets under management, around 106 different holdings, which we're going to go through here in a second. And that's also why I think this fund sort of matches some of the similar metrics that SCHD has. SCHD has just around 100 holdings also. Now, moving right along, looking a little bit deeper into the FDVV Fidelity High Dividend ETF, this is where this ETF differs from that of SCHD, and like I said during the intro, might even do things a little bit better in some ways. Now, what I mean by this is that the holding breakdown is as follows. The majority of this ETF is technology at almost 26%, then industrials at around 15.5%, consumer defensive at 11.3%, and then around 10% or under are things like energy, utilities, real estate, financials, healthcare, consumer cyclical, and communication. Now, of course, depending on exactly what you're looking for in the stock market, whether you're trying to have more exposure to growth names or income producing names, etc., regardless of what you're looking for, I would say honestly, just by first glance, this is a pretty good breakdown and kind of gives you a little bit of everything. Now, this is where this ETF really shines, in my opinion. The top 10 holdings are some of my favorite names across the entire market. We have around 5.8% of the fund invested into things like Apple, 5.8% invested into Nvidia, then a large portion, 5.7% in Microsoft, Procter & Gamble's 2%, Exxon's 2%, Broadcom, Philip Morris around 2%, then under 2% are things like Pepsi, Ultra, etc. So although it's sort of a random mix of different, more growth-focused and value-focused names in the top 10 holdings, honestly, for me personally as an investor, that's kind of exactly what I'm looking for in my long-term portfolio. I want to own names that are going to grow in price over time, but also, even though I'm relatively young, at 31 years old, I'm personally looking to generate a ton of dividend income ASAP. Now, as far as expense ratio, this is also an important concern whenever you're investing into any ETF, of course. The expense ratio is 0.15%, which is generally very cheap. Although if we were comparing FDVV to SCHD, for example, this expense ratio is almost 3 times as much, but still relatively cheap considering what this ETF has to offer, in my opinion. Now, before we look at the growth of this ETF and see how this ETF has performed as far as price return goes or lack thereof, etc., looking at the amount of cash flow this ETF has provided so far, dividends are very important to me, like I said. This ETF has a trailing 12-month dividend yield of around 2.92%. Now, especially because you're getting exposure to names like Apple, Nvidia, etc., this is a massive starting yield, especially because this ETF does not utilize a covered call strategy. This is just bare bones, which is pretty awesome. Now, one of the concerns I honestly do have about this ETF, though, is dividend growth or lack thereof. ETF, although has a little bit of dividend growth, it looks like, it's more or less been paying around the same amount of dividend income for the last, say, 6 or 7 years. And to be more specific, on the trailing 12 months, the dividend growth rate is actually minus 1.05 so far. The last 3 years, though, it's been pretty good, 11.86%. But on the longer time frame, again, this ETF has not been trading all that long, but 2.89% 5-year dividend growth rate is not necessarily what I'm looking for personally as an investor. But maybe the price return has made up for it, especially because this ETF, like we said, has invested into some very high beta big movers, which is seen because this ETF is up over 16% on the 1 year. Year to date, the ETF is up over 14%. So again, if we were to compare this to SCHD, as far as price return goes, this is absolutely crushing my beloved SCHD. Now on the max time frame, again, this ETF has only been trading since around September of 2016. This ETF is already up almost 94% as far as price return goes. And again, even if you're earning a 3 or so % yield, even if it's not growing all that fast, that's pretty impressive, which is one of the reasons this ETF caught my eye. Honestly, because as a dividend growth investor, although right now I'm building up my personal SCHD position, I'm always open and on the prowl to find different dividend growth style ETFs like this one. And honestly, so far, in a lot of ways, this ETF looks almost pretty much perfect. Now, I will say, as far as a buying opportunity goes, although this ETF over time, other than a few massive drops, has continued to trade up and to the right over time, this ETF basically is trading at all-time highs right now. So unless you're extremely bullish on the market from these levels, or unless you're a long-term buy and hold forever investor, it might or might not be a good time to buy this one, if you ask me. But what I was interested in, and of course, maybe most importantly for the context of this video, I was saying that this ETF might in fact even be better than that of SCHD. So if we were to compare SCHD to FDVV and look at the start date of 9/15/2016 for both of them, invest $10,000 and reinvest the dividends along the way, I was really curious on which one of these ETFs would give a better, bigger total return. So the numbers are in, and over a 7.85 year time frame for both these ETFs, a $10,000 investment with dividends reinvested for FDVV would have turned into $25,407, or an average annual total return of 12.64%. Now SCHD's 10K would have turned into $25.134 thousand, or around 12.45%. So even though it's a very, very close race, and even though, in my opinion at least, both of these ETFs could be great long-term buy and hold positions, SCHD came in number 2 actually on this time frame, which is crazy. FDVV did outperform SCHD at least in September of 2016. Now that being said, even though FDVV did outperform SCHD, this ETF still does offer a little bit higher of a starting yield and does have a track record for some massive dividend growth historically. But to be completely fair, the Fidelity High Dividend ETF, FDVV, is also a great option, in my opinion, for dividend growth investors out there looking to stash away some cash and get paid more and more over time by doing so. Now you guys might be wondering if, after looking a little bit deeper into the Fidelity High Dividend ETF, am I personally going to add any of this one to my long-term portfolio? And my answer is honestly most likely. Out of this one, DGRO, DGRW, along of course with SCHD, these are all dividend growth ETFs that all have the potential to move up in price over time, but also historically have paid more and more in dividends over time, at least some more than others. So honestly, after digging a little bit deeper into FDVV, unless of course I'm missing something, let me know in the comments if I am. I definitely will be adding some of this one to my portfolio sometime soon here. So now that we went over FDVV, we compared it to SCHD, and we even learned that this ETF has performed better than that of SCHD over a certain time frame at least. I want to hear from you guys down below. Do you currently own any FDVV in your portfolio? And if or if not, what are your thoughts on it as of right now? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.